If I understand the readers of my blog correctly, and you should be one of them, by the way, then they are fed up with the news as it is at the moment. I get the impression that a lot of them, like me, are swearing at the screen on their television too often for comfort, and that frankly, quite often, they're simply turning off rather than face another news bulletin that might be best described as a theatre of distraction. The lights are bright. There's the noise of relentless media churn, but the truth is the cast never really change. There's Trump and his latest fiasco. There's Farage and his latest ridiculous claims, and always, of course, the royals putting forward something else to try to distract us from the fact that, as a firm, which is what they like to think of themselves as, they're failing. And whilst the show goes on and the noise continues, the country is quietly falling apart behind the scenes. And that's what really annoys me about the news media. We're not getting the news on what really matters. There is a problem behind our news media. It's crowding out care and truth and responsibility and passing us nonsense dressed up as news on things that at the end of the day, in very many cases, don't really matter. They're allowing failure to pass unnoticed, in other words. And there are hidden crises that they aren't talking about. Take poverty, for example. Millions of children go hungry in this country, and we are the sixth richest nation on earth. Free school meals are still being denied to many children who need them. Only the very youngest get them as of right. And food banks are serving millions of people in this country who can't otherwise get a decent meal because their families are without the means to provide them. This is the true index of national failure, but it very rarely gets reported unless one of those media stars, whether it be a prince or a politician who wants to get some attention for their good and worthy nature, goes to open yet another food bank as if that is a sign of virtue, when they haven't even realised that what they're talking about is the whole failure of the system that keeps them in power. And then there's the whole crisis of housing. Housing in this country is treated as a speculative asset and not as a human necessity. Rents and mortgage costs have soared. Households are being pushed to their limits as a consequence, and there are quite simply far too few social houses. And then I read housing market commentators saying, oh, the problem is the government says it will build 300,000 houses a year, but no one can buy them. So why are we bothering? Without ever joining up the dots and realising the only person who can buy those houses and solve the problems of too many living in squalor that we face is the government itself. They must be the buyer. But no one is talking about that because for too long the assumption has been that houses are built for investors and not for families. And so a slow disaster is ignored every day by the nightly news. Meanwhile, there's a crisis of care. The NHS is on its knees. It does not have enough money as a consequence of deliberate government policy. And people are still dying in corridors, which is utterly unacceptable. Meanwhile, social care is rationed and is almost invisible to most people, and another round of cuts will just make it harder to supply from hard-pressed local authorities where there is nothing left to give. Carers are exhausted, undervalued and unseen, and many of them are vilified because they have come here as first or second generation workers. All of this is about ignoring the real needs of the politics of care that can't compete in terms of the news spectacle as it's being created with the flashiness of those who want to be seen but who add no value, unlike those who pick up the elderly who've simply fallen over. Behind the scenes, there's also another crisis, the one that has motivated me for so long, the climate crisis. the energy transition seems to have stalled. The media is attacking it. Every day I get headlines from the Daily Telegraph saying how we are going to basically go to hell because we're trying to actually tackle the biggest crisis that our human race has probably ever faced, which is how we live within the planetary limits that this whole ecostructure that we live within on Earth is imposing upon us. We know that the 1.5 degrees limit, which we were supposed to comply with, has now passed. We can't stay within that now. The United Nations has said so. And despite that, ministers claim leadership in this whilst licensing oil fields. The contradiction is deliberate. They want to claim the benefit for providing us with future prosperity through oil, when actually what they're doing is condemning us to future overheating of our planet, which is going to make life impossible and deny us the opportunities we want, or that we want for those in generations to come. Who profits from all this distraction? Well, of course, the populist does, the demagogue does, and the courtier does. People with power who want to avoid responsibility do. The City of London does, because it wants to deflect attention from what it is up to. Our politicians do, because they don't want to talk about their failures. They only want to talk about their policy announcements and not their achievements, or the lack of them. They thrive on noise, but not results. And all the time that is the case, democracy withers in the glare of their spotlight. The consequence is that accountability fades, because the media is not doing its job. It is not holding these people to account and asking them what is actually happening and why aren't you doing anything about it. Public services do, as a result, decay all too quietly, when there should be a vast amount of noise about why they are in the state that we're suffering, and real policies actually even disappear from view because nobody cares to give them attention. What's the overall result? People are losing faith in democracy itself. And of course, all of that paves the way for right-wing demagogues to try to take over power. What must change then? We must look away from these artificial spectacles created by the news media through their press releases, through their video opportunities, through their sound bites, through what the media decides is newsworthy when in fact it isn't, because of its hyper attention to the personality of a few and the suffering of some as a consequence of crime, which is still a tiny actual threat to the well-being of most of us, and that they refuse instead to concentrate on the things that matter, which include food poverty, housing, care and climate, as I've talked about in this video. That refusal to question what is really going on is their failure in turn to participate in democracy. The media is refusing to deliver what we need to sustain the society in which we live. So we must talk about a politics of care. I keep saying this, I know, but it matters, because the politics of care begins with one question, which is, what do people need to live well? We know that we need public investment and not austerity. We know that we need to tax those with wealth more and not punish those in poverty. We know we need an economy built around well-being and not on spectacle, and in particular, spectacle created by the wealthy to distract the rest of us from the fact that we are losing out because they are exploiting us. The pantomime of this type of media has to come to an end. News has to be relevant again. The country is breaking while the circus of this news media round goes on, and attention has become the currency of power. We need to stop funding that circus. We need to stop giving these people the attention they crave because their own lives are actually so hollow. What we need to do is reclaim the news so that it's about what's going on again. It shouldn't be about undermining us and destroying us, which too often it is, because that is the message that we are given, that our lives are not of worth compared to the people who are being talked about in the news media. And instead, we need to have news about real people doing real things for real benefit for each other in a way that guarantees an increase in well-being. That is what the news media should be talking about now. And because we aren't there as yet, What it should also be talking about is how we do get there, which is, of course, the task of a courageous state, something else that I talk about quite often. And a courageous state is one that takes on power and wins, because it could if we wanted it to. And my point is that with the news media we've got, that's hard. And so we have to talk about the news media that we haven't got, or at least the news media that we haven't got, which is put out on things like the BBC, and instead talk about how we can create that news media ourselves, including through things like YouTube. You have the power to change the messaging in this world. You can partake, you can deliver, you can talk about what matters. And if we all begin to do that, then we begin to get the news that matters to us all, which is how life gets better.
Thanks for watching this video. If you've enjoyed it, please do click the like and subscribe buttons, because they do genuinely help us spread the word on YouTube. As importantly, could you have a look at the section below this video where it says more, and there you'll find a link to my blog. And if you follow that for the specific link to the blog entry related to this video, you'll find a transcript of this video and lots of other related material, plus a ChatGPT prompt that you could use to write a letter to your MP on the contents of this video, which will turn you into a campaigner, which will be a great thing to do. Finally, if you do appreciate the work we're doing, can you think about giving us a donation? If you'd like to do so, there's a link below, or you can find one on my blog where there's a Ko-fi button saying, please buy me a coffee. Thanks a lot, and we'll see you again soon.